The sound of heavy machinery tearing through my prized heritage tomato garden at 6 in the morning wasn't my alarm clock of choice, but there she was, Brenda Holloway, standing triumphant in her leopard print blazer and rhinestone sunglasses, directing a bulldozer, like she was conducting a symphony of destruction. "This is what happens when you ignore HOA regulations," she shrieked over the engine noise, waving a clipboard like a battle flag, while my grandfather's century-old heirloom plants got crushed under steel treads. What she didn't know, what made me smile despite watching 20 years of careful cultivation disappear into mud, was that I held the mortgage note on her precious $5 million wellness center, and her payment was due in exactly 72 hours. My name is Marcus Reed, and I'd moved to Cedar Ridge Ranch 6 years ago after selling my tech security firm for more money than any reasonable person needs. I wasn't looking for trouble, just 40 acres of Texas hill country where I could grow vegetables, raise some chickens, and forget about corporate warfare. The property came with an old limestone house, perfect soil, and absolutely no HOA, or so the real estate documents clearly stated, but Brenda, president of the Willowbrook Estates, HOA, 5 miles down the road, had apparently decided that geography was more of a suggestion than a legal boundary. The first time I met her was at the local farmer's market 3 months ago. I was selling my heirloom tomatoes, thick-skinned beauties with flavor that could make a grown man weep, when she marched up to my booth like she was serving a warrant. "Are these GMO-free?" she demanded, picking up a Cherokee Purple and examining it like evidence. I assured her they were completely organic, grown from seeds my grandfather had saved. She sniffed, unimpressed. "Well, they're bringing down property values with their irregular shapes. People expect uniformity. That should have been my first warning. Anyone who judges tomatoes by their symmetry has already lost touch with reality." 2 weeks later, I found the first notice taped to my gate. Official HOA violation. Unapproved agricultural activities. I laughed, actually laughed out loud, because my ranch was a full 2 miles outside their jurisdiction. I'd checked the maps, verified the boundaries, even had my lawyer confirm it when I bought the place. But Brenda wasn't deterred by trivial things like legal boundaries or property rights. She decided that her authority extended to anywhere she could see from the highest hill in Willowbrook, and apparently, on a clear day with binoculars, she could just make out my greenhouse. The notices kept coming. One for my chicken coop's non-conforming color, it was red, like every barn in Texas. Another for my compost bins, creating potential odor violations. And my personal favorite, a citation for excessive butterfly attraction because my wildflower meadow was, quote, encouraging unpredictable insect flight patterns. Each notice came with escalating fines that I ignored with increasing amusement. After all, she had no legal authority over my property. It was like getting a speeding ticket from someone who wasn't a cop. Creative, but ultimately meaningless. But Brenda didn't see it that way. She started showing up at my gate, always in different designer tracksuits that looked like they'd been attacked by a bedazzler. Always with that same clipboard. Always with new violations. "Your scarecrow is creating a hostile environment," she announced one Tuesday. "The flannel shirt promotes negative stereotypes about agricultural workers." Another time, "Your garden rows aren't parallel to the county road. It's visually disturbing to passing motorists." I started keeping a journal of her complaints, thinking it might make a funny book someday. Little did I know I'd need it for legal evidence. The situation escalated when she discovered my greenhouse. I'd built it myself, a beautiful structure of reclaimed windows and salvaged timber that caught the morning light like a cathedral. Inside, I grew exotic peppers, arate herbs, and yes, more tomatoes, varieties you couldn't find in any store. Brenda took one look through the glass and declared it an unauthorized commercial structure. When I pointed out that I wasn't running a business, just growing food for myself and friends, she clutched her pearls, actual pearls, mind you, and gasped. "Giving away produce is commercial activity. You're undermining local grocery stores." That's when I started digging into Brenda's background, using skills I'd picked up during my tech days when due diligence could make or break a deal. What I found was fascinating. Brenda Holloway, age 45, Former pharmaceutical sales rep turned wellness entrepreneur. She'd opened Harmony Springs Wellness Center 2 years ago, a massive complex that offered everything from yoga to colonics to something called crystal-infused oxygen therapy. The place looked like a spa had mated with a hospital, and their offspring had a trust fund. But the real interesting part was the financing. She'd taken out a $5 million loan to build the place, shopping around for the best rates. The loan had eventually been packaged and sold to various investors as part of a mortgage-backed security, and through a series of coincidences that would make you believe in karma, I'd bought a significant portion of that exact security package 6 months ago as part of my investment portfolio. I didn't target her specifically. I was just looking for stable returns on commercial real estate. But there it was in black and white. I held the note on Brenda's dream business. I didn't plan to use this information. It felt petty, like bringing a nuclear weapon to a food fight, but I kept it in my back pocket while Brenda's harassment continued. She organized a community meeting about my ranch, even though I wasn't part of her community. She started a petition calling my garden an agricultural eyesore. She even hired a drone to photograph my property, which backfired spectacularly when the drone crashed into my chicken coop and my rooster. Napoleon decided to fight back. Have you ever seen a rooster attack a drone? It's nature's way of saying technology has gone too far. The turning point came when Brenda decided that notices weren't enough. She needed to take direct action, as she called it, in the group email she sent to her HOA board. I know about the email because Tom Bradley, one of her board members and a decent guy who bought eggs from me, forwarded it with a warning. She's lost it. Marcus, Tom wrote, she's talking about removing the blight and restoring visual harmony. I think she's planning something stupid. Tom was right. 3 days later, while I was at the farmer's market selling the last of my summer squash, Brenda executed what she probably thought was a brilliant plan. She hired a bulldozer, actually hired heavy machinery, and drove onto my property with a work crew. Hair target? My heritage garden, where I grew varieties of vegetables that had been in my family for generations. Plants my grandfather had brought from Italy, seeds my grandmother had saved through the Depression, living history in the form of tomatoes, peppers, and beans. By the time I got Tom's frantic call and raced home, the damage was done. 20-foot swaths of destruction through plants I'd nursed from seed. Trellises I'd built by hand crushed into splinters. And there in the middle of it all stood Brenda, posing for photos like she'd just won a war. Documentation of blight removal, she announced to her assistant, a nervous-looking young woman who kept glancing at me apologetically. Make sure you get the before and after shots for the newsletter. I stood there, looking at the destruction, feeling something cold and calculated replace my initial rage. Brenda had crossed a line, several lines, actually, including property destruction, trespassing, and criminal mischief. But more than that, she'd destroyed something irreplaceable out of petty authoritarianism. She strutted over, clipboard in hand, designer boots squelching through the mud that used to be my garden. This is what happens when you refuse to comply with community standards, she said, not even trying to hide her satisfaction. Maybe now you'll understand that the HOA's authority isn't something you can just ignore. That's when I smiled. Not a nice smile, the kind of smile I used to wear in boardrooms when someone had just made a fatal negotiation error. Brenda, I said, pulling out my phone, I need to show you something interesting. I pulled up my investment portfolio, scrolled to the commercial real estate section, and showed her the entry for a certain $5 million mortgage. Her face went through several fascinating color changes as she processed what she was looking at. That's my wellness center, she stammered. Yes, it is, I confirmed, and according to my records, your balloon payment is due this Friday. $5 million. All at once. As per the terms you agreed to, I paused, letting that sink in. Now, normally I'm quite flexible about payment terms. But for someone who just destroyed $20,000 worth of heritage plants and committed multiple felonies on my property, I'm feeling surprisingly strict about contract enforcement. Brenda's clipboard slipped from her fingers, landing in the mud with a splat that seemed to echo across the ruined garden. Her assistant took several steps back. Phone out. Recording everything. You can't, that's not. I have 30 more days, Brenda sputtered, her commanding pose crumbling like my demolished tomato trellises. Actually, I said, pulling up the contract on my phone. You have 72 hours. Page 47. Subsection C. Early call provision in case of default or criminal activity. Destroying my property while trespassing definitely qualifies. I looked around at the destruction, calculating, though I suppose we could work something out. You know, neighbor to neighbor. But before I could elaborate on what that might mean, Brenda did what Brenda did best. She escalated. "This is extortion," she screamed, pointing a manicured finger at me. "You set me up. You bought that loan just to control me. I'll sue. I'll call the police. She paused, seeming to remember that she was standing in the middle of my destroyed garden with a bulldozer she'd hired illegally parked behind her. "Please do call the police," I encouraged. "I'm sure they'd be very interested in this situation. We can discuss the trespassing, the destruction of property worth over $20,000. That's felony level, by the way, and the harassment campaign you've documented so thoroughly in writing." I gestured to her mud-splattered clipboard. "You've been remarkably diligent about creating evidence. Very helpful." Her assistant, who'd been recording the whole exchange, cleared her throat. "Mrs. Holloway, maybe we should go." But Brenda wasn't done. She bent down, grabbed her clipboard, and waved it like a weapon. "I am the president of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. I have authority. I have power. You can't threaten me with some piece of paper." "Funny thing about pieces of paper," I said, staying calm while she spiraled. "Some of them, like HOA notices sent to properties outside your jurisdiction, are worthless. Others, like legally binding loan documents, can change your life. Want to guess which kind I'm holding?" The bulldozer operator, who'd been sitting in his machine this whole time, chose that moment to speak up. "Ma'am, I'm gonna need payment for this job. Cash. Like we agreed." Brenda spun around to face him, and that's when she noticed that quite a crowd had gathered, neighbors from actual nearby properties, not her HOA fiefdom, had come to see what the commotion was about. Several had their phones out, recording the president of Willowbrook Estates standing in a destroyed garden, screaming about authority she didn't have. "This isn't over," Brenda declared, trying to salvage some dignity as she squelched through the mud toward her Mercedes. "My lawyers will be in touch." She slipped on a crushed tomato, arms windmilling for balance, and her assistant had to catch her before she face-planted in the ruins of my heritage beans. The metaphor was almost too perfect. As her car sped away, tires spinning in the mud, I surveyed the damage more carefully. The destruction was extensive but not complete. Some sections of the garden had survived, and more importantly, he had saved cuttings in the greenhouse, and the knowledge to rebuild. Plus, I now had leverage over someone who'd been making my life miserable for months. The question was, what to do with it? Tom Bradley approached cautiously, stepping around the worst of the mud. "Marcus, I'm sorry. I tried to warn you, but I didn't think she'd go this far." He looked at the destruction with genuine sadness. "Your grandfather's tomatoes? This is horrible." "Tom," I said, an idea forming. "How many people on the HOA board are tired of Brenda's dictatorship?" Tom's eyes lit up with possibility. "Most of us, honestly. But she controls the meeting agendas, has all the documentation, knows the bylaws better than anyone." He paused. "Why?" "Because I think it's time for some new leadership at Willowbrook Estates." I said, "And I have 72 hours to make that happen." The next morning, I woke to find 17 missed calls from Brenda and 43 from various numbers I didn't recognize. I ignored them all, and instead focused on documenting the damage. My insurance adjuster, Carl, whistled low when he saw the destruction. "This is deliberate vandalism." "Marcus, clear cut. Who did you say did this?" "The president of an HOA I don't belong to," I explained. Carl laughed, then realized I was serious. "Oh, well, that's a new one. Got evidence?" I showed him the videos various neighbors had taken, Brenda's email planning the blight removal, and her own photos that her assistant had helpfully sent me with an apology. She hired a photographer to document her committing felonies? Carl asked. Incredulous. That's either very stupid or very confident. Why not both? I suggested. We walked through the garden, Carl taking photos and notes while I pointed out what had been destroyed. The heritage tomatoes were the worst loss. Varieties like Cherokee Purple, Black Crim, and my grandfather's special San Marzano strain that he'd smuggled from Italy in 1952. Can you put a price on heritage? I asked Carl. He shrugged. Insurance-wise, we'll figure something out. But personally, some things money can't replace. While Carl finished his assessment, I made a call to my lawyer, Patricia Chen, who'd handled the ranch purchase. Patricia, hypothetical question. If someone who owes me $5 million destroys $20,000 worth of my property, can I call in the loan? I could hear her smile through the phone. Hypothetically, check the criminal activity clause. Most commercial loans have provisions for borrower malfeasance. Send me the documents. Brenda, meanwhile, was in full panic mode. According to Tom, she'd called an emergency HOA board meeting, declared a financial state of emergency, and tried to pass a special assessment to raise $5 million from the homeowners. She wants each household to pay $25,000, Tom reported, voice shaking with suppressed laughter. By Friday, the board voted it down 9-1. The one was her. That afternoon, a parade of lawyers arrived at my gate. Not just any lawyers. Brenda had apparently called in every favor, hired every firm, and leveraged every connection she had. They came in waves, like well-dressed locusts, each one with a different approach. The first tried intimidation. Mr. Reed, my client is prepared to pursue aggressive litigation if you proceed with this loan call. The second went for sympathy. Surely we can work out a payment plan that doesn't destroy a small business owner. The third tried negotiation. What would it take to make this go away? To each one, I gave the same response. Your client destroyed my property while trespassing. We can discuss the loan after we address the criminal charges, and to each one, I showed the videos, the emails, the documentation Brenda had so helpfully created. By the fourth lawyer, word had apparently spread because he opened with, my client may have made some poor choices. Poor choices? I laughed. She hired a bulldozer to destroy my garden because she didn't like how my tomatoes looked. That's not a poor choice. That's a crime spree with landscaping equipment. That evening, as the sun set over my ruined garden, casting long shadows across the bulldozer tracks, I got an unexpected visitor. Brenda's assistant, the nervous young woman who'd been recording everything, stood at my gate with a box of files. Mr. Ride, I'm Ashley Chen. I wanted to apologize and, well, I thought you should see these. I invited her in, and over coffee, Ashley laid out 3 years of HOA documents. Mrs. Holloway has been expanding her authority systematically, Ashley explained, started with properties adjacent to the HOA, then moved outward. You're not the first person she's targeted outside the boundaries. She showed me files on other victims, a retired teacher forced to remove her bird feeders, an artist who had to take down his sculpture garden, a young couple who'd been fined into selling their home. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Ashley sighed. Because I took this job thinking I'd be helping build community. Instead, I've been documenting a reign of terror by someone who thinks a clipboard gives her supreme authority. Plus, she smiled slightly, she hasn't paid me in 2 months. Apparently, the wellness center isn't as profitable as she pretends. The files Ashley provided were a goldmine, financial records showing Brenda had been using HOA funds to prop up her failing wellness center. Emails where she discussed expanding the tax base by forcibly annexing neighboring properties. And most damning, a presentation titled Project Harmony, Converting Greater Willowbrook into a Planned Community. My ranch was marked as Phase 3 Acquisition. She was planning to force me out. I said, studying the map. Ashley nodded. The garden destruction was supposed to be the start. She figured if she made your life miserable enough, created enough violations, you'd sell. Then she'd buy the property through a shell company and develop it into Harmony Springs East. I leaned back, processing this information. Brenda wasn't just a petty dictator with a landscaping fetish. She was running a sophisticated scheme to expand her empire. The wellness center was bleeding money, so she was trying to create a real estate empire to fund it, using the HOA as her weapon. "Ashley," I said, making a decision, "how would you like a new job?" The next morning, day 2 of Brenda's 72-hour countdown, I made my move. First, I filed criminal charges for trespassing and destruction of property. Then, I sent a formal notice to every member of the Willowbrook Estates HOA board, attached with Ashley's documentation of Brenda's financial improprieties. Finally, I did something that would have made my corporate warfare days proud. I called a meeting of my own. The meeting was held at the Willowbrook Community Center, a building that Brenda had spent $40,000 of HOA funds renovating into what looked like a discount version of Versailles. Gold-painted crown molding clashed with LED strip lighting, and motivational posters about community excellence covered walls that should have held actual art. I'd rented the main hall for a agricultural heritage presentation, which wasn't technically a lie. I was about to present the heritage of how Brenda had been cultivating disasters. By 7 p.m. The room was packed. Word had spread through 3 neighborhoods about the showdown between the Tomato King, as some had started calling me, and the HOA Queen who terrorized anyone with a mailbox for 3 years. Tom Bradley sat in the front row with 8 other board members, all looking like kids on Christmas morning. Ashley had set up a projection screen and was testing the slides we'd prepared. 3 years of Brenda's greatest hits, documented in her own obsessive detail. Brenda arrived 15 minutes late, which for her was like showing up naked. Punctuality was one of her favorite weapons. She swept in wearing what looked like a business suit made of mirrors, reflecting light in every direction like a disco ball, had achieved sentience and gotten a law degree. Her lawyer, a different one from yesterday's parade, flanked her like an overdressed bodyguard. "This meeting is unauthorized," she announced before even reaching the podium. "As president of the HOA, I haven't approved this use of community space." Tom Bradley stood up slowly, smiled, and held up a piece of paper. "Actually, Brenda, according to the bylaws you love quoting, any board member can call an emergency meeting with 24 hours notice. I called this one." The look on Brenda's face was like watching a computer try to divide by 0. I took the podium, adjusting the microphone that squealed in protest. Even the equipment seemed to have opinions about Brenda. "Good evening, everyone. I'm Marcus Reed. And, as many of you know, I grow tomatoes on a ranch that isn't part of Willowbrook Estates. At least, it wasn't supposed to be." I clicked to the first slide, a photo of my destroyed garden. 2 days ago, Mrs. Holloway hired a bulldozer to destroy my heritage vegetable garden because she didn't like how it looked from 5 miles away. Gasps rippled through the audience. I heard someone whisper, "She said she was removing a public health hazard." I clicked to the next slide, Brenda's own photos of her standing triumphantly in my destroyed garden. These are from Mrs. Holloway's own documentation. She was so proud of destroying my property that she hired a photographer. More gasps. Some angry muttering. Brenda shot to her feet. That garden was in violation of 17 different ordinances. I smiled and clicked to the next slide, a map showing the HOA boundaries in my ranch, with a helpful 2-mile gap between them. That would be impressive, considering my property isn't in your jurisdiction. It's like getting a speeding ticket from someone in another state. Creative, but legally meaningless. Now, I continued, clicking through slides of other victims. I'm not the only one, Mrs. Holloway has targeted. Mrs. Patterson, would you like to share your story? An elderly woman in the 3rd row stood shakily. She made me tear down my grandmother's rose arbor, said it was attracting unregulated pollinators. I'm 87 years old. I don't even know what that means. One by one, neighbors shared their stories. The young couple fined for having the wrong shade of beige on their mailbox. The veteran who received citations for his American flag being too patriotic. The family whose children were banned from playing in their own yard between 2 and 4 p.m. because that was optimal property viewing time. Each story painted a picture of a woman who turned a homeowners association into her personal kingdom. Brenda's lawyer kept trying to object, using legal terms that sounded impressive but meant nothing in this context. "Objection, hearsay," he'd shout. Tom Bradley would respond. This isn't a court. Doug. Sight down. It was like watching someone try to play chess at a checkers tournament. Then I dropped the financial bomb. But harassment is just the appetizer. Let's talk about where your HOA fees have really been going. Ashley clicked to the next slide. A complex web of financial transfers between HOA accounts and Harmony Springs Wellness Center. Over the past 2 years, Mrs. Holloway has borrowed approximately $800,000 from HOA funds to prop up her failing business. The room exploded. Board members who'd been kept in the dark jumped to their feet. Homeowners shouted questions. Brenda's lawyer actually said, "Oh shit," into his microphone before remembering it was on. Brenda herself had gone the color of expired milk, gripping the table like it might fly away. That's a lie," she stammered. "Those were legitimate community investments." I clicked to the next slide, an email from Brenda to her wellness center manager. Quote, "Transfer another $40K from the HOA reserve. Tell them it's for landscaping. These idiots never check the receipts." End quote. I paused. "Mrs. Holloway, you really shouldn't put your fraud in writing. It's like signing your own arrest warrant." Tom Bradley stood again. I motioned for an immediate vote of no confidence in Brenda Holloway as HOA president. The motion was seconded so fast it might have broken the sound barrier. But before they could vote, I raised my hand. "Actually, there's one more thing everyone should know." I pulled up the loan documents on the screen. I hold the mortgage on Harmony Springs Wellness Center. $5 million. Due in full in. I checked my watch. 47 hours and 16 minutes. The room went silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and what sounded like Brenda's soul leaving her body. However, I continued, "I'm willing to discuss terms. Mrs. Holloway, would you like to negotiate?" What happened next was like watching a nature documentary about cornered animals. Brenda went through all 5 stages of grief in about 30 seconds. Denial, "This is all fake." Anger, "You set me up." Bargaining, "Can't we work something out?" Depression, slumping in her chair. And finally, acceptance, "What do you want?" First, I said, resignation as HOA president, effective immediately. Second, full restitution to the HOA treasury. Third, payment for my destroyed garden. I'm thinking $50,000 should cover the heritage varieties. Fourth, a written apology to every person you've harassed. And fifth, you'll deed over that empty lot you bought next to my ranch, the one marked for Phase 3 acquisition. Brenda's lawyer whispered frantically in her ear. She pushed him away. "And if I do all that," I smiled, "then we can discuss a very reasonable payment plan for your loan. Say, 20 years at 3% interest? Much better than bankruptcy." The vote of no confidence was unanimous. Even Brenda voted against herself, though I think that was just muscle memory from being contrary. Tom Bradley was elected interim president, and his first act was to reverse every one of Brenda's expansion plans. The room erupted in applause that lasted so long my ears rang. As people filed out, many stopping to shake my hand or share their own Brenda horror stories, she approached me, up close, without her armor of authority. She looked smaller, older, tired. "Why?" she asked. "You could have destroyed me, called in the loan, pressed charges, ruined everything." I thought about it. "Because, Brenda, I just wanted to grow tomatoes in peace. You turned it into a war. Wars have casualties, but they can also have peace treaties. Your choice, which one you want." She nodded slowly, then did something I never expected. She apologized. Not a great apology, more like a dog coughing up grass. But it was there. I got carried away. The power, the control. It felt good. She looked at her hands. "I used to be a pharmaceutical rep. Do you know how powerless that feels? Following doctors around, begging for 5 minutes, being dismissed constantly? So you became what dismissed you." I said. She nodded. "I guess I did. The wellness center was supposed to be different, a place where I made the rules, where I mattered, but it's failing. And I tried to fix it by taking control of everything else." She laughed bitterly. "I bulldozed your garden because I couldn't bulldoze my problems." It was almost enough to make me feel sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered my grandfather's tomatoes crushed under bulldozer treads, and the sympathy evaporated. Brenda, you targeted people who couldn't fight back. Elderly residents, young families, anyone you thought was vulnerable. I'm giving you a chance to make it right. Don't waste it. She straightened up, some of her old spine returning. I'll have the paperwork ready tomorrow. All of it. Even the apology letters. She paused at the door. Your tomatoes really were beautiful. I'm sorry I destroyed them. Then she was gone, leaving behind only the faint scent of expensive perfume and broken dreams. Tom Bradley appeared at my elbow. Think she'll follow through? I shrugged. She's got 46 hours to figure it out. Either way, Willowbrook Estates is free. He clapped me on the shoulder. You know, we could use someone like you on the board. I laughed. Tom, I don't even live in your HOA. He grinned. Details. We could always expand the boundaries. The look I gave him made him step back. Kidding. I'm kidding. We've learned that lesson. The next morning, I woke to find something unexpected. Brenda's Mercedes parked at my gate, and Brenda herself, dressed in jeans and a t-shirt I didn't know she owned, standing in my ruined garden with a shovel. What are you doing? I asked. Walking out with my coffee. Starting to fix what I broke, she said, not looking up. I can't bring back your heritage plants, but I can at least clean up the mess. She'd already filled 3 wheelbarrows with debris. I've been up since 4, couldn't sleep, kept seeing that video of me standing in your destroyed garden, grinning like I'd won something. She finally looked at me. I looked like a monster. You looked like someone who'd forgotten that power isn't about control. I said, it's about responsibility. She nodded and went back to shoveling. I watched her for a minute, then grabbed another shovel. We worked in silence for an hour, clearing bulldozer tracks and broken trellises. Finally, she spoke again. I transferred the HOA funds back this morning. All of it. Plus interest. And I've drafted 17 apology letters. My hand cramped on number 12. And the lot? I asked. She pulled a deed from her pocket, signed and notarized. It's yours. Maybe you can expand your garden. She paused. I've also restructured the wellness center financing, sold my house, liquidated my portfolios. I can make your payment deadline. I stopped shoveling. You sold your house? She shrugged. 6,000 square feet was too much for one person anyway. I'm moving into the apartment above the wellness center. If I'm going to make this work, I need to commit fully. We worked until noon. When Ashley arrived with a truck full of new plants, I called every nursery in 3 counties. She announced, no heritage tomatoes, but I found some interesting heirlooms. Cherokee purple, black crim, even some San Majanos. I stared at her. Those are heritage varieties. Where did you find them? Ashley grinned. Turns out Mrs. Patterson, the one with the rose arbor, has been secretly growing them for years. When she heard what happened, she donated starts from her greenhouse. Said it was the least she could do for the man who freed Willowbrook from tyranny. We spent the afternoon planting. An odd trio, the tomato farmer, the former dictator, and the assistant turned hero. Neighbors stopped by to help or gawk. Someone brought sandwiches. Someone else brought beer. By sunset, my garden was still a shadow of its former self, but it was alive again, and that was what mattered. The next day, Brenda's 48-hour deadline, she appeared at my door with a cashier's check for $5 million and a box of documents, every penny. She said, plus all the paperwork you requested, even the apology letters. Hand-delivered this morning. I examined the check, the deeds, the resignation letters, all legitimate, all complete. One question. I said, how did you raise $5 million in 3 days? She smiled. The first genuine smile I'd seen from her. I had investors lined up for the wellness center expansion. Instead of expanding, I consolidated, sold them 49% of the existing business. I maintained control, but now I have partners to keep me in check. Learned that from recent experience. I endorsed the check back to her. She stared at it. Then at me. I don't understand. I leaned back. Consider it an investment. You've got a business to run. Legitimately this time. Pay me back over 20 years. Like we discussed, 3% interest. But I held up a finger. I want something else. Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. What? I smiled. Community service. Specifically, you're going to teach free wellness classes for senior citizens. Mrs. Patterson could use some yoga after what you put her through. And gardening workshops at my ranch once a month. Time to learn why heritage tomatoes are worth preserving. Brenda looked at the check. At me. At the check again. You're giving me a second chance. I shrugged. Everyone deserves one. Even HOA presidents who hire bulldozers. But Brenda, this is your only chance. Don't waste it. She didn't. Over the next months, Harmony Springs Wellness Center transformed from a vanity project into a genuine community resource. Brenda taught morning yoga to retirees, offered free nutrition classes, and yes, learned to appreciate irregular tomatoes. The gardening workshops at my ranch became so popular we had to add sessions. Watching Brenda teach suburbanites, the difference between determinate and indeterminate tomato varieties was surreal. But she threw herself into it with the same intensity she'd once reserved for measuring grass height. The Willowbrook Estates HOA, under Tom's leadership, became what it should have always been. A community organization focused on helping neighbors, not controlling them. The 17-page rulebook was reduced to 2 pages of common-sense guidelines. The fine system was abolished. And the boundaries? They stayed exactly where they legally belonged. 6 months later, at the first annual Willowbrook Heritage Tomato Festival, held jointly at my ranch and the community center, Brenda found me judging the ugly tomato contest. Marcus, she said, holding a particularly grotesque Cherokee purple, I owe you more than money. I owe you a lesson. I spent so much time trying to control everything that I forgot to appreciate anything. Well, I said, awarding her tomato third place for most likely to frighten children. You're learning, that's what matters. She laughed. A real laugh. Not the calculating sound I'd first heard. My wellness center is profitable. Legitimately. My clients actually like me now that I'm not trying to dominate them. And these workshops? I've discovered I actually enjoy teaching. And the HOA? I asked. She shuddered. I can't believe I spent 3 years measuring people's grass. What a waste of life. She paused. I've been thinking about that empty lot. The one I deeded to you. What are you planning? I smiled. Community garden. Free plots for anyone who wants to grow something. Tom's already designing the irrigation system. Ashley's handling the organization. And you? You're teaching the composting classes. She groaned. Composting? Really? I nodded. Consider it part of your rehabilitation. Nothing teaches humility like turning garbage into gold. The festival was a success. Over 300 people came to admire, taste, and yes, laugh at tomatoes of every shape and size. Mrs. Patterson won Best in Show with a San Marzano that could have modeled for Renaissance paintings. The youth group from Willowbrook raised $500 selling tomato plants. And Brenda? She gave a surprisingly moving speech about the beauty of imperfection and the danger of unchecked authority. I stood in Marcus Reed's garden with a bulldozer, she told the crowd, convinced I had the right to destroy what didn't match my vision. But gardens, like communities, aren't about conformity. They're about diversity, growth, and yes, the occasional weird tomato that doesn't fit the mold. She held up her ugly tomato trophy. I've learned to appreciate the irregular, the unexpected, the uncontrolled. It's made me a better person and definitely a better neighbor. As the sun set over the festival, painting the sky tomato red, I found myself standing where my heritage garden had been destroyed and reborn. Ashley approached with a clipboard. Old habits die hard. But this one held sign-up sheets for next year's garden plots. We're already at capacity, she reported. Might need to expand? That's fine, I said. I've got 40 acres. We can spare a few more for people who want to grow something real. Tom joined us. Beer in hand, surveying the crowd of neighbors who'd gone from victims to victors. You know, he said, when I first heard about the crazy tomato farmer fighting the HOA president, I thought it would end in lawsuits and restraining orders. It nearly did, I admitted. But sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, it's transformation. I watched Brenda teaching a group of kids how to save tomato seeds. her designer clothes replaced with practical gardening gear, her imperious voice softened with genuine enthusiasm. Even the worst dictators can become decent teachers if you give them the right classroom, and if you hold their $5 million loan, Ashley added with a grin. We laughed. But she had a point. Sometimes it takes leverage to create change. But the real transformation came from something simpler, the power of a community refusing to be controlled, the strength of neighbors standing together. And yes, the humble persistence of heritage tomatoes growing despite bulldozers and bureaucracy. As the festival wound down, and people headed home with seedlings and stories, Brenda approached one last time. Same time next year? She asked. I nodded. Wouldn't miss it. But Brenda? Maybe skip the bulldozer this time. She laughed, a sound that no longer made me check my property lines. Deal. But I'm bringing my own tomatoes. I've been working on a hybrid that's ugly enough to win the whole contest. Now that, I said, sounds like proper competition. We shook hands. Former enemies turned unlikely allies, bound together by dirt, debt, and the discovery that sometimes the best way to deal with a tyrant is to teach them to garden, because in the end, you can't bulldoze a community that's truly rooted. You can try, but like heritage tomatoes, they'll just grow back stronger, stranger, and more beautiful than before. The sound of heavy machinery no longer wakes me at 6 a.m. these days. Instead, it's the roosters from 3 different backyard coops, the laughter of children in the community garden, and yes, the occasional yoga class led by a former dictator who learned that real power comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down. My heritage tomatoes grow in neat rows, surrounded by chaos gardens planted by neighbors who learned that perfection is overrated and community is everything. And Brenda? She paid off her loan in 5 years instead of 20. Her wellness center thriving. Once she stopped trying to control everyone and started actually helping them, she never rebuilt her HOA empire. But she did build something better, a reputation as someone who'd fallen from grace and climbed back up, one tomato plant at a time. Because that's the thing about gardens and communities. They don't care about your past mistakes. They only care if you're willing to get your hands dirty and help things grow. The meeting that night felt like déjà vu. Except this time, Brenda and I sat on the same side of the table. The new HOA president, a woman named Karen Fitzgerald who wore a pantsuit that screamed middle management crisis, had come prepared with binders of regulations and a smile that could strip paint. The expansion of Prescott Meadows Authority is perfectly legal, she insisted. Spreading maps across the table, we're simply ensuring uniform community standards across the greater metropolitan area. I noticed she'd included my heritage center in her proposed management zone. History really does repeat itself, just with different bulldozers. But Karen had made a crucial error. She'd assumed we were the same scattered, intimidated community that Brenda had once terrorized. She didn't know about our monthly legal workshops, our community defense fund, or the fact that Ashley Chen had gone to law school and was now our pro bono counsel. Most importantly, she didn't know about the Holloway precedent, the legal case that had established clear limits on HOA expansion. Brenda stood up slowly, and the room fell silent. Everyone remembered her at her worst, but they'd also witnessed her transformation. When she spoke, it was with the authority of someone who'd been on both sides of power. Mrs. Fitzgerald, I once stood where you're standing, convinced that my clipboard gave me dominion over everything I could see. I destroyed property, lives, and ultimately myself in pursuit of control. She gestured to the Heritage Center photos on the wall. You see that land? I tried to steal it with paperwork and bulldozers. Now I teach gardening classes there, by invitation, because the owner I tried to destroy showed me mercy I didn't deserve. You have 2 choices. Withdraw your expansion plans now, or face the combined legal resources of 3 communities who've learned exactly how to fight HOA overreach. Karen sputtered, threatened, and ultimately retreated, but not before trying one last power play. This isn't over. I have resources, connections. Brenda cut her off. You have delusions. I had them too. The only cure is humility. And trust me, It's better to learn it voluntarily than to have it taught to you by a tomato farmer with a mortgage note. After Karen left, defeated but not yet educated, the room erupted in applause. Someone shouted, "Brenda for president." She laughed and shook her head. Those days are over. I'm much happier as head of the ugly tomato committee. But I could see the pride in her eyes. She'd used her hard-won wisdom to protect others from her former self. Later that night, as we cleaned up the meeting room, Ashley pulled me aside. "You know, what you did for Brenda, giving her that second chance, it changed everything. Not just for her, but for all of us. We learned that even the worst authority can be reformed." I thought about it. Maybe that's the real lesson. Not that power corrupts, but that compassion can redeem, even HOA presidents. The epilogue to our story came the following spring. The state legislature, prompted by our case and dozens of similar conflicts, passed the Community Garden Protection Act. It established clear limits on HOA authority and included something called the Reed-Holloway Amendment, a provision protecting agricultural heritage sites from arbitrary enforcement. Brenda and I testified together at the hearing. Former enemies united in purpose. The gentleman from Texas has an interesting history, the committee chair noted, reviewing our files. "Mr. Reed, you held a $5 million sword over Mrs. Holloway's head. Why didn't you use it?" I looked at Brenda, who was nervously adjusting her glasses, reading glasses now, from too many late nights studying horticulture texts. "Because, Senator, destroying someone teaches them nothing except how to hate, transforming them. That teaches the whole community how to heal." The amendment passed unanimously, with a note in the record about the tomato garden incident that had sparked statewide reform. These days, my mornings still start before dawn, but now it's to prepare for the steady stream of visitors who come to learn our story. School groups, community organizers, even reformed HOA boards seeking guidance. They all want to know the secret of turning conflict into community. I tell them it's simple: plant something together. It's hard to hate someone when you're both kneeling in the dirt, hands covered in soil, hoping for growth. Brenda still pays her mortgage, religiously on time, often hand-delivering checks with vegetables from her personal garden. Last month, she brought a Cherokee purple so perfect it could have won best in show. But she'd entered it in the ugly category anyway. "Beauty is overrated," she said. "Character is what counts." The Heritage Center hosts 5,000 visitors annually, now, each one learning not just about tomatoes, but about the danger of unchecked authority and the power of redemption. We've expanded to include heritage grains, ancient fruit trees, and a library of agricultural wisdom. Brenda's Wellness Center partners with us for farm-to-table nutrition programs. Tom's HOA has become a model for community governance. Ashley's law practice specializes in defending against HOA overreach. And me? I still grow tomatoes. Heritage ones. Ugly ones. Perfect ones. Weird ones. Each plant a reminder that diversity is strength, that beauty comes in all forms, and that sometimes the best response to someone trying to bulldoze your garden is to help them plant their own, because in the end, we're all just trying to grow something meaningful in the soil we're given. The last time I saw Karen Fitzgerald, she was buying tomato plants at our spring sale. Her pantsuit replaced by jeans and a humbled expression. Brenda was helping her choose varieties, explaining the difference between determinates and indeterminates with the patience of someone who'd learned that teaching is the highest form of redemption. Karen left with 6 plants and a packet of seeds labeled Second Chances, a variety Brenda had developed herself, known for thriving even in the poorest soil. That's the thing about gardens and communities. They're endlessly forgiving if you're willing to get dirty and do the work. My grandfather's heritage tomatoes still grow in neat rows, but now they're surrounded by thousands of other plants, tended by hundreds of hands, each one learning that the real power isn't in controlling growth, but in nurturing it. And somewhere in that garden, among the perfect and imperfect plants alike, grows the truth that saved us all, that authority without compassion is just destruction waiting to happen. But authority with wisdom can make the whole world bloom.